Welcome to this week's Into the Wilderness podcast. I have to apologise straight away because Floki the Cocker Spaniel thought he would try and join in our interview, and he was knocking, clanging, he was growling at one point because I think someone tried to deliver something, and he's now in his bed curled up because he's been told off, but I think he's just doing what a Cocker Spaniel does, apart from he has taken to eating rugs like, your front door mats. He's now on number 3.
Well, he's killed 2.
He's killed 2.
You've had to buy 2.
3, yeah, but he's also killed a rug as well. It's really odd that it only seems to be like carpet-based things that he destroys. So if anyone has any advice other than abandoning them on the side of the road, no, I'm only joking. Then get in touch.
Actually, I should just add to that. The reason why that's actually quite a funny but sad joke is that we have another dog in this household called Spartan. Yeah. Spartan is a 4 or 5-year-old husky.
It must be 5 now. Yeah.
And poor Spartan was actually found on the side of the road by Daryl when he used to work in Glasgow. You can give that the
well, I mean that is the. He
was only, 10 weeks old?
Yeah, the vet thinks he was about 10 weeks old when I brought him in. And he was just left on the side of the road, on the Loch Lomond Road in Glasgow. And I took him in and took him to the vet. And they didn't, you do the normal, report it to the police. But I think it's a very, very common occurrence, especially around big cities, Glasgow, probably Edinburgh as well, for dogs to be left. I mean, you see it all the time. In fact, it was Dunfermline train station, I think it was, that someone just tied up. This is a few months after we found Spartan. Someone just tied up their dog at the train station at the railings and just left it there. Terrible. So it happens a lot. What they reckon might have happened with Spartan is that one of his testicles hadn't dropped, so useless for breeding.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why he had to get them
chopped off.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so poor Spartan is not so poor Spartan anymore because he has a freaking awesome life.
He has one of the best lives
for a husky.
Yeah.
And he is downstairs, but he is actually behaving unlike the Cocker Spaniel.
He does actually behave very well.
Just not in the last couple of days. We have Phil Massaro on the podcast today. You heard from Phil a few months back when we were in Ewa. We did a very short show with him. He was with us in Scotland at an event a couple of weeks ago, which you're going to hear all about or hear a little bit about. And unfortunately, we didn't have a chance during that event in Blair Athol to do any podcast because it was just rammed from first thing in the morning until the last thing at night. But we did meet a lot of really interesting people, Phil being one of them, who are going to be coming on the podcast. So you'll be hearing the spoils of all the interesting people.
Plus
that we
the films, plus the pictures. So you will get the full experience, other than actually being there.
Yeah, that's the best we can do.
Yeah, it's the best we could do.
So we're going to talk to Phil about a whole range of topics. There's a little bit of conservation at the start, although that wasn't our original intention. He's going to talk about guns, big bore guns, big cartridges, and some of his hunting experiences from Mozambique to Australia. And we're also going to touch just a little bit on the news that came out a few weeks ago about the banning of and restrictions of grizzly bear hunting in BC. We have competitions to tell you about before we get to all of that. Yeah. And don't go anywhere. Don't skip ahead to the interview because we have a massive announcement in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, we do.
So the first thing is we have a winner for the which was from 2 weeks ago, which was the Surefire Ear Defenders and the Hornady beer mug. And I apologise right now for butchering your name. It's Welsh because you live in Wales, so I'm assuming it's a Welsh name. Llewellyn Harrison. So congratulations, you've won. Please ping us a message. We'll get that stuff sent down to you. We had another competition from 2 weeks before, which was a picture competition. Daryl shortlisted them across social media.
On Instagram and Facebook.
Exactly, and it was up to all of our great listeners and the people who follow us on social media to decide who won. And the winner by quite a margin was a young lad who, unfortunately, I don't actually know his name, but I know who his father is, so I'm going to tell you that soon. And he's standing there with a shotgun and 2 pheasants, one in each hand. And that won by miles. So congratulations, Sean Porter. It's your young son. So, Sean, you are winning for your son. We've had this before where a father said, so you need to make sure that he gets it. It was a vintage Hornady sign, a reloading sign for a vintage Hornady sign. So congratulations. That's what you've won.
Yep. And do we have another competition this week?
Well, we do. So for this particular show, as always, a new competition. You may have noticed that and this was Daryl's brainwave off the back of people requesting some of our pictures for desktops for your PC or your laptop. So we have put, right now there's only one, but by the time the show goes out, there should be 3 desktop backgrounds downloadable off our website, thepacebrothers.com. So if you go on there and hit gallery, you will see a drop-down that says download, and in there you'll find some nice wallpapers to download. So the competition for this month requires you to take a picture of your computer with our background on it.
Or a screenshot of your phone, if it works on your phone.
Yeah, and either tag us in it on Instagram or comment underneath the competition or email us. Anyway, as long as we see it so that we can get everybody's name in a list.
And then we'll just pick.
Well, yeah, then it's going to be random after that. And you have a chance through that competition to win a CZ polo shirt and a Hornady baseball cap.
Not a bad little prize.
Nope. So we'll stick those up on social media with the ways that you can enter. As always, please get downloading and please send us the pictures of the desktops.
Yep. We have a few little announcements to make on the shop front. We are at the end of our stock. We have 1 mug left, or that might have gone. I'm not entirely sure.
There's 1 mug left.
1 mug left. Yeah. There is a handful of T-shirts left.
No XLs, no larges.
Please check on the website for the sizes that are available. Like Byron just said, we're now running out. Yeah, mediums and smalls. Medium and smalls. So, and they're discounted. They're £10 right now.
They are. But fear not, there are some even better designs coming out very soon.
That's the reason why we've dropped the price. We don't have many left now. We're trying to, we want to kind of clear space because we don't have a massive amount of space for all of the new stuff that's coming. So there's new designs coming, new mugs, car stickers, thermoses, podcast mugs. We're bringing out a lot more products with cool designs. And thank you. Over the last, I think it was a year ago, I think we brought out the first lot of stuff requested by everyone. People were asking for T-shirts and mugs, and we did it. And
true to your word, people have been buying.
People have been buying, and we've sold out. So it's pretty amazing, and I hope everyone enjoys the new collection of stuff. And we are going to bring some cool little products, unique little things that we use, hopefully, but run up to Christmas.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah,
if we can find time.
Yeah.
But that is the hope. So yes, and in case you didn't realise, the shop is also on the website I mentioned earlier, thepacebrothers.com. We are going to be in New Zealand next year, in the first 2 weeks of June, well, maybe a week before, because we might go and see our cousin, for a hunting trip with Joseph Peter of Hard Yards Hunting. He has a lot of great pictures of really quite extreme terrain. It's making me slightly afraid already. So go and check out him on Facebook and on Instagram. I had the first conversation with him a few days ago about what the trip's going to look like. I think there's going to be a lot of walking, maybe 5 to 10 days, walking a massive loop around and hunting as we go. It's going to be epic, and as we get more details of what that trip's going to look like, we will tell all of our listeners. And of course, the intention with a trip and expedition like that is that we will be making a film off the back of it.
Yeah. And pictures.
And pictures. So you will get to share some of the experience with us. It's a long way away, but I know that the time's going to disappear.
It's going to creep.
And we need to get training.
Yeah, we do. And thanks to our Australian listeners, because we've got a great Australian contingent of listeners.
Yes, we do.
That I think we mentioned it last time. We got a few emails to come over to various different places in Australia to go and hunt. So we really do appreciate that, and we probably will be taking one of two of you up on.
We're going to try
offers because we need to stop somewhere because I have done the journey to New Zealand and it's
pretty miserable.
It's pretty miserable. You need to break it up. So if we could find somewhere in Asia, that means we could break it up, because the last time I went Kuala Lumpur, there's probably nothing to hunt in Kuala Lumpur, but a stop there, and it made the flight very bearable when you break it up.
Yeah,
that way.
there's
Going
a bit
back.
of even fishing
Actually,
or hunting in
we
Asia.
could do fishing.
So,
Fishing on the way back.
anybody got any recommendations, or anybody live there who can point us in the right direction? Somewhere that would be a stopover from the UK to Australia.
So somewhere, anywhere in there that is a recognised route. Well, by recognised route, I mean like flights often stop in Kuala Lumpur, or they stop in Qatar, or they stop in places like that, which you can get back to the UK without costing another £1,000. I mean, you could always just do a loop around the world, go UK, Australia, America, back to the UK.
Yeah, we could do. I don't think we'll have time for that.
Or go north. You could go like Fiji, then Japan.
Or we could just take a year out and drive around the world.
Yeah, okay.
Let's make it something that has the possibility of happening.
Yeah.
So somewhere between the UK and Australia, let us know what you're thinking so that we can.
Yeah, any good suggestions would be good. You know what? The Middle East does actually have some bloody good hunting in it, and is actually a reasonable stop.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what people come up with, and then
we don't have that many listeners out in the Middle East.
No, we don't. So
they're
need
all
to try and change that.
They're all
expats.
They're all expats, or they are working out there on a rotation.
So we will see what happens. I'm very much looking forward to that, and we have some other trips coming up soon, but we can't tell you about them, I'm afraid. But we will when we get back from them. However, we have one very, very big announcement. And as far as I know, this is going to be the first time it has ever been run in the UK. This happens a lot in the States, probably more than anywhere else in the world, in America and Canada. Not really so big in Europe, and certainly not in the UK. In conjunction with the Northern Shooting Show, which is next year, starting next year, we are going to be...
Should have brought up the dates. The dates are online.
The dates are online. That's why I was hesitating there. I can't remember the dates.
We will, trust me, we're going to tell you a lot about it in the coming weeks.
We're probably going to be talking about it every second podcast. We are going to be running the UK's first hunting film festival. It is called the DNA Hunting Film Festival. DNA, as in it's in us, our DNA, standing for Discover New Adventure. So the Discover New Adventure DNA Hunting Film Festival. If you follow us on social media or the Northern Shooting Show, you will have seen a teaser go out a couple of days before this podcast that just showed the DNA Hunting Film Festival logo. And as this podcast goes out, we'll be putting all the stuff on it on social media. So the deal with this is we want to encourage people to make film, but make film that tells stories. We're going to have a whole list of criteria and what we're really looking for, but the core of it is going to be stories. Yes, we want things to look nice. We want people to take the time to make things, try and make it look cinematic, but we don't want to exclude people by kit.
Yeah.
If you can tell a great story, do not worry how you've managed to capture it. I've seen some incredible things, admittedly done by very good videographers, done on an iPhone. Mm-hmm. Because they've taken the time to plan shots, and it's incredible what they've been able to do. But they have edited it.
But that's being smart.
That's being very smart. So it really is, with the way technology is now, open to everybody. There's going to be two categories. There's going to be an amateur category and a professional category. We will define these, but basically, amateur, you can't do any paid work for videography. And for the professionals, if you do any paid work, you can enter that. The prizes are quite...
We're entering a lot of films in the amateur category ourselves. I'm only joking. We are running it. We will not be entering any films of our own.
No, we won't.
Maybe one of ours will show, but it will not be entered.
No. I don't think that would be fair, considering that we're judging it.
No, exactly.
Well, we won't be the only people judging it, I have to say.
Be.
We're going to put together a great panel who haven't decided yet and let everybody know.
So we'll have the cinematic eye, in a way.
Yeah.
Cover the film side of things, so we can critique the way the film is made. And
but we're gonna we know enough people across the industry, well-known people, that I'm sure we'll be able to get them on board to help judge. The prize that we've managed to sort, thanks to Robert at Blaser Sporting down in based down south, is a Sauer rifle and Minox binoculars. So for the professional category, you will have the chance to win a Massaro rifle. The winner of that whole category will win a Massaro rifle, and we will tell you which one very soon.
There will be other prizes for runners-up and other shortlisted films as well. So most people will probably end up getting something, I imagine.
I would hope so. Yeah, something. And sorry, I should just say, and Minox binoculars is what you'll win
in the amateur.
In the amateur, yeah. And on top of that, as well as winning, your film, if you win, will be shown on the big screen, which I've just been told is even bigger. The screen is even bigger than it was last year.
I don't know how that's possible.
In the very centre main hall of the Northern Shooting Show on both days. That's pretty incredible.
Both films, so the amateur and
both films
will be shown, and there will be a prize presentation at the Northern Shooting Show.
Yes, on the Blaser stand.
Yeah.
So it's never been done before. There have been online film festivals, but to be a proper film festival, you actually have to show the films in a hard setting, in a place.
Yeah, it needs
not
to be
just
a proper presentation, and there needs to be
a screening.
It has to be a screening of the film that people can all come to.
So both films will be screened, and the shortlisted. What we'll do prior to announcing the actual winners is we will put together sort of the best clips of all of the shortlisted films, and they'll all show as a trailer before the winner. So even if you don't win but you get shortlisted, you will have some of your footage up on screen.
All the details will be online, but I can tell you now, you'll need a trailer and your main film. Everything will need to be done with that, but there'll be a lot more details in the coming weeks. But now we're just letting you know that it's a way to begin, and people can start thinking about their ideas or films they've made in the last year.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the other thing, is that it needs to be. We want it to be fairly current. So we would like people to have filmed it in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
But we'll put those criteria down. And of course, we're right at the start, really, of the hunting season. The red rut is just about to start. All the bird seasons are opening. There's hunting all around the world right now. So it's the perfect time, if you haven't done it before. This is even, especially with the amateur category, about encouraging people to do it for the first time and tell your story. Mm-hmm. Here's the opportunity. Here's the incentive to do it.
Did we say we were going to have an international category?
No, it's going to be open
to everyone.
So this is not just for people in the UK, although we would love people from our home country to be the bulk of.
You need to up your game. There's some impressive people around the world doing some very incredible things at an amateur level.
Yes, no, Daryl is absolutely right. But to all of our listeners on the podcast from around the planet, this is going to be open to you.
There will be a small fee to enter. This is to cover administration, basically. A lot of time and effort goes into putting on these things, not just from ourselves, but from Northern Shooting Show as well. So between the two of us, well, I say the two of us, I mean Pace Productions, me and my brother, and the Northern Shooting Show, we obviously need to be able to afford to do this.
Mm-hmm. But also, it is most definitely worth your while, because the prizes they're worth a lot of money. Yeah. We're going to tell you exactly what they're worth once we once we know exactly what models we're going to be giving away.
Yeah.
So that's it. You're about to hear from Phil. We kick straight into it. It's I just wish I'd had longer with him, because I really enjoy talking to Phil, and I'm sure we're going to be speaking to him.
He's going to come on again, and we are going to the States at some point. We keep saying this, but it is happening, because the hunting film tour is on, and the dates are going to be announced shortly.
I was just speaking to Gary just 2 days ago, and we were trying to work out which showing in the hunting film tour that are.
This is separate to our thing, hunting film tour. This is for the film In Search of Reverence, and it's going round the United States and I believe Canada for 12 months.
Yeah, from August to August.
August to
July.
And it gets shown all around the countries in cinemas all over the place, and our film is one of a few films that is being shown at the films, and we are going to go to one of the screenings, and it's more likely going to be the United States that we're going to, because we have other things we want to go see.
Gary reckoned that one of a good screening for us to go to would be the one in Idaho, or one of the ones in Idaho. I don't know if they have multiple screenings.
So do we have any listeners in Idaho?
we probably do. So we would appreciate it very much if you are an Idaho listener. Ping us a message, because
we are going to go to Montana as well.
We have to,
because we've got people we need to go and see there.
Yeah.
But I think that is it.
I think that's it. We've talked about a lot of travel around the world. I don't know when we're going to find time to do it all. Don't forget, as always, that this podcast is supported and sponsored by the Scottish Association for Country Sports. Phil, thank you for joining us on the Into the Wilderness podcast. You are not new for this podcast. We had you on when we met you in Ewa quite a few months back now, and we have just spent a quite marvellous couple of days with you in Blair Athol, along with a whole bunch of other journalists on a rather special trip. Tell our listeners a little bit about that. Give them an overview of what we were doing up there in the Highlands.
Mark Newton and Simon Barr and I have been friends for quite some time, and I was at the Dallas Safari Club show last January, and Mark was showing me the new Rigby rifles, and he kind of winks at me and pulls me behind the booth, and he goes, "I want to show you something that hasn't been out yet." I'm like, "Okay." And he pulled out one of the first Highland Stalkers, and I picked it up, and I just, look, I'm a connoisseur of fine rifles, and especially older styled rifles. I really have a passion about that. And I looked at him and I said, "Buddy, you've got a guaranteed winner here." I said, it's right. The lines are perfect. It's right where it needs to be. Price point that's affordable, could become a family heirloom, blah, 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 blah. And he asked me, he said, "Could you come to Scotland with me in September to hunt a red stag?" And it took me a half a nanosecond to go, "Yeah, I'm open." So, we all got together. We had a wonderful tour of the Rigby shop and their gun making facility behind it. I learned a lot about what goes into, the hand finishing of the Rigby rifles. But, from there we got on the Caledonian Sleeper and woke up in Blair Athol to the sound of bagpipes on what was actually one of the prettiest estates I've ever seen in my life. I got to tell you, a kid coming from a very poor background, deer hunting was everything to me as a younger man. And I've definitely got the Africa bug. While I respect Europe, don't get me wrong, I love to travel in Europe. I'm an Italian, of Italian descent. And, I've traced my family's history and roots and been there. I never really gave a lot of thought to hunting in Europe, but I'm hooked. The Scottish Highlands have a certain addictive quality to them, both as we all experience together, those traditions. Ronnie Hepburn was our stalker. He was in his 60s, and this guy was just a walking machine. But I don't know if you drink the water and it gets in your blood or what the deal is. It was a fantastic experience with no holds barred. The Blair Athol Castle experience was wonderful. To be in the hills among the heather and the grass and the Garin ponies and those views, weather changing every 15 minutes, and even the midgies. I have to give props to the midgies because they're part of the experience.
I can't believe that you've given the midgies credit for your experience.
Place, I'm sitting here just 2 weeks out of the hunt looking at my wife going, "I'd go back next year." I'm sure, you guys are natives, so maybe it doesn't have the same allure to you, but, I could see it in your face. It was a very, very special experience.
That was your first time in Scotland, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And, if you've got to, get your feet wet, as they say, that's a hell of a way to do it.
Just before we come off this, because we could literally talk about an hour just on that trip, and I'm sure we're going to cover it again at some point. Using a Garin to take a stag off the hill. There will be a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are hunters and stalkers and have probably shot a lot of deer, but quite a small number of people have probably had the privilege of using a pony. What is that experience like, and what does it add to it, Phil?
Well, it was essentially a 2-day hunt for me. I got my stag on the first day, and we actually used an Argo to get it out. But for me, the pressure was off. At that point in time, I went with Mike Scobie and Mark Newton, and we had the ponies in the hills. So I had no pressure as a shooter. I just got to sit back and soak it in. There's and invariably there's a connection between horses and humans, just like there is with dogs and humans. We all work together well for centuries, and to have those beasts up in the hills was just nothing shy of fantastic. They've got special saddles, engineered to get the stags across, not for humans' asses. And, they work so well in that environment. Short-legged, sturdy little beasts. And it was really awesome. You know, the entire thing had a flair to it that is hard to describe to an American who's familiar with our white-tailed deer hunting. You know, we have our own traditions, and it's all fantastic stuff. But I would say that the Scottish traditions especially are very, very deep-rooted, very well respected, and time-honored. You know, so for me to take part in that was just fantastic. You know, the stalkers, the traditional garb, the Garin ponies, you know, even the little things, the stalker's carrying of the rifle and setting up the shot kind of creates a bond between two hunters that you don't get on a solo deer hunt here. And, you know, I think the best way I can put it to you is that I would go back again next year. You know, it kind of hit me in the feels, if you will. Struck a real chord with me as a hunter.
It is absolutely tremendous. And if anybody has the opportunity to go in the hills with a pony, just absolutely do it, because it does add a dimension which is quite unlike anything else. Phil, if we extract ourselves from Scotland and maybe talk a little bit about some of your other hunting adventures over the last couple of years, one thing we don't do a massive amount of on this show is just story tell. I talk about guns and ammo and the actual hunting experiences, because we're very often talking about quite serious topics, a lot of conservation-based topics. So, and we're going to touch on something towards the end of the podcast, but where have you been recently? Is there something you'd like? Was it Australia you were in recently, or was it you've just come back from Africa not too many months ago?
Last November, we were in Mozambique unveiling the Heim Model 89B on a Cape Buffalo hunt. And in July, we went to Australia, into Arnhem Land for water buffalo.
Okay.
So a couple of great experiences. Let me touch on Mozambique first. You know, African hunting, you know, and I know you guys are conservation guys and a little politically driven, which I think is a great thing, because these issues and ideas need to come to the forefront. I went on a non-trophy, non-export Cape Buffalo hunt, which essentially means that, you know, I'm going to pay the fees, and I'm going to pay the hunter, and I'm going to pay the conservation block fees, but I'm not taking the horns, the hide, the head, anything home. It all belonged to the community. We did it for a show called Tracks Across Africa, and if you go on, there's an app called My Outdoor TV. It's kind of inexpensive. You can download it and watch the show. We, at the end of the show, presented the meat of that buffalo to the village, and to watch those women with the babies tied on their back, and some, you know, younger children with babies tied on their back, everybody received a piece of meat. Everybody's family was fed. You know, it was providing protein to a protein-starved environment, and I'll be honest, it felt really good to me. You know, and there's the usual, you know, accusations. Oh, he's a trophy hunter. He just shot it for the head. And that wasn't the case. You know, we took a respectable head in the fact that it was an old bull. You know, he was past his prime. You know, horns worn smooth, just 100 years old. And, you know, he's going to die. The lions are going to get him, or old age is going to get him. And we took him and we utilized his meat, which was fantastic. So, you know, for me as a writer, as a hunter, and someone like you guys who want to spread the message, that felt really good. You know, did I do it, you know, for the good of the people? Well, that's half the thing. First and foremost, I'm a hunter and I like hunting, and I'm not going to excuse that fact or try and hide it or be ashamed of it in any way, shape, or form. But, you know, I will say that, you know, with the arrangement that Mark Haldane of Zambezi Delta Safaris has in Kutana 11, he provides, I think it's 40 buffalo and 80 reed buck to these communities. And the anti-poaching that he does has brought his buffalo herd from 2,900 animals, I think it was a decade ago, up to 30,000. So you've got a win-win situation. You know, you've got a healthy herd of animals. You've got a population of humans that are native, not only employed by Mark in that block, but, you know, these people are fed well. They don't need to go poaching. It's just handled properly. And, you know, for me, that was an eye opener. So, you know, if I can get you guys a link to that, I will. And if you want to, you know, comment on it in the future, I think that was one of those points that, you know, it's really hard for anybody to argue with. And, you know, while they say, well, you know, hunting's cruel, but when was the last time you gave, you know, 800 pounds of meat to a village? Yeah,
I'll look that one up, actually, because I've got the My Outdoor TV app, so I will go. Is it up to watch now, Phil?
I believe so, yes.
Cool.
Yes, it ran last season, so it should be. It was season 13. I'm not sure of the episode, 4 or 5 or something like that.
I'll definitely go check that. I know
is there a free month trial right now or something?
There's quite a lot.
There's quite a few.
No, there is a free month trial.
Yeah, so if you sign up
watch.
now with My Outdoor TV, you'll get a 3-month trial. I'm not sure if it's UK only, but it's just launched in the UK, as many people might have heard on the news.
Yeah. Everyone go check that out. I'm going to go watch that episode. I know what you were saying there, Phil. That Mark Haldane there, he's done some fantastic work, and the anti-poaching efforts that are basically funded by hunting there is quite staggering, and on a scale that doesn't really get done by the governments.
No. Well, you see, again, you've got that double-edged sword. The government doesn't have the financial resources to do that level of anti-poaching. Now, Mark is almost a zealot about it, and he's shown me enough snare wire to fence in a farm, and he's shown me gin traps that he has so many gin traps he's actually using them as reinforcing steel when he pours concrete, which is a scary thought. When your professional hunter says you put your feet exactly in my footprints because this could be put. It's a rather unsettling feeling, but he's got he's got a helicopter. Funded by Dallas Safari Club, who is a huge backer in this thing. DSC is so pro, anti-poaching that they help out with an immense amount of money. So he's got the little helicopter. He's got a squad of motorcycles and guys who really know how to do it well. We were there filming for the TV show, and they'd picked up a couple of poachers. You see the guy maybe, put up a fight or whatever the case may be, but they had him in custody and took him to the powers that be. And, look, it's good for the game. It's good for the people. It's a win-win situation. And, when it comes to African animals, cuddly animals aren't supposed to be killed, I suppose you could say, in the eyes of the anti-hunter. Nobody ever complained about a hyena being shot or a crocodile being shot. But, God forbid you shoot a lion and it's like, oh, that's cute. And Disney had one, so we can't do that. But when you really want to have, the rubber hit the road, you look at Mark Haldane's Kutata 11 as a conservation model, and it's really, really difficult to argue the numbers. Numbers don't lie. Facts don't lie. The game is back. The Renamo-Frelimo conflict has been quelled, at least for the time being, and the game has come back to the point where when you go out on those Zambezi floodplains, you'll see herds of buffalo approaching 1,000 animals, which is something I've never seen.
Staggering. It's been a lot of years since I've seen those kind of numbers. I'm chuckling to myself here, Phil, because I said before you went to talk about your trip to Mozambique, so we're going to storytell and talk about guns and stuff here, but immediately it's been dragged, and I don't actually believe it was intentionally by you, an amazing conservation story, and I think that just shows to people this is not the intention of this conversation. Right? We're just talking and giving people a bit of insight into what you get up to, but immediately that is where we've ended up, and that's fantastic.
Well, for me, look, I could tell you we took a fantastic Heim Model 89B in a classic cartridge.
And I do want to hear that too.
3-inch nitro. And we took a great bull. And while as a hunter, that was an absolute highlight for me, that connection with the village almost superseded that. So if you're asking me, I suppose that was part of the highlight of that trip as well. Did I make a great shot, and was it incredibly exhilarating? Yes, undoubtedly. I mean, Cape Buffalo hunting, if I had terminal cancer and they said you've got 6 weeks to live, that's what I would want to hunt. That's my favorite thing. But, it almost trumped it when we delivered everything to the village. And I said, that's a really cool thing right there. I am a gun writer, and I'm as pro-conservation as you guys are, and I make every effort to, spread that message around in my articles and whatever videos we do. But, Dave Folson over at Safari Classics Productions and I felt that was such an important part of that experience that we made it the last 5 minutes of the TV show to show the viewing public that, hey, we're not just a bunch of guys out there for our own glory. There is a bigger message here.
Mm-hmm. I was going to save this to the end, but it ties in quite well with this example that you've just given us here, Phil, which is what's happened in BC with the banning in some areas and the Great Bear, I think it's called the Great Bear Forest for grizzly bear, and then the restrictions of hunting in other places. Now, we're not going to go into massive detail of this, but it has just happened in recent weeks.
It's been in the news in the UK, so it's a fairly significant thing.
made your headlines, huh?
Yeah, it has made our headlines, and why I'm drawing the comparison here is you have an example there with the buffalo where basically everything, you're not allowed to take anything, but everything is being utilized. Whereas what we have here in BC, from my understanding, in the areas where there's now these greater restrictions, is there's going to be meat extraction allowed, but everything else has to remain. And it's not like someone else is utilizing it. It's just going to rot out there.
It's, and like you said, without getting into deep emotion on my end or too much depth, there's an emotion here in the political vein. It's not among the hunters, and I don't even think it's among the average citizens. It's become very vogue lately to poo-poo the killing of anything, and it's so entirely hypocritical that I get actually physically angry about it. We all eat meat. We all utilize meat. We're only here because of meat. We domesticated animals and survived and developed the brain we have because of protein that is in meat. I mean, it wasn't broccoli that we don't have teeth to mow grass. We have canines and incisors, and I don't want to kill everything on the planet. I don't want to look. I wouldn't hunt a rhino. If they gave me the tag, I wouldn't do it. I don't think the situation is right, just like I wouldn't hunt a tiger. But that said, British Columbia, where I've never personally set foot, but I have many friends who are outfitters, guides, and people who have hunted it as well, have a healthy population of grizzly bears. And if anything, Teddy Roosevelt's Northern American conservation model works. We brought back the bison. We brought back the pronghorn antelope. Especially here in upstate New York, we brought back the white-tailed deer. We have a healthy population of black bear. Across southern Africa, South Africa's efforts, Namibia's efforts with the rhino have been nothing but positive until late. The emotion, from what I understand from the story, and if I'm wrong, I will own it. But from what I understand in British Columbia, it's an emotion-driven thing. We don't want to be that kind of people that just goes hunting grizzly bear. And I mean, to me, there's a live and let live kind of thing. Do we want to go out and shoot everyone? Absolutely not. I don't think there's a hunter in this day and age who would adopt that mentality and try and defend it openly. Wise utilization and conservation. The hunter pays, the animals are managed, the species thrives, the habitat is conserved. I think that natural flow, because human beings have taken over the planet, is very, very important in this modern era. If there was a study that said that those grizzly bears in that area were extremely endangered and, for whatever reason, they needed to be preserved, I'd be okay with it. Put a 10-year ban on it, let them come back, and then let's re-examine it when we get numbers that are better. My personal thought is, though, if we go around, just like with Confederate statues or Brexit or whatever, where somebody's constantly offended, we're headed down a very, very slippery slope that could result in some tragic and maybe even unintended consequences. I don't know. What do you guys think about the whole thing?
I mean, I need to read more into it, but my understanding from what I have read and what I've listened to is pretty much as you've outlined, Phil, which is that in these areas where they have put these new restrictions in, which is meat removal but without any trophy, no fur, no claws, no skull. It has been, and on top of that, the banning completely of grizzly bear hunting in the Great Bear Forest, and I think maybe one or two other places, has, as you've said, had nothing to do with poor management through hunting. In fact, quite the opposite. For many, many years, the proliferation of grizzly bears there has been as a result of very careful management and harvestable surplus of populations. The hunting has had, to the best of my knowledge, absolutely no negative impact on the populations and arguably positive impacts on the population. So it is very much a case here of people through government either reflecting the view of maybe the mass of people who voted them in, or maybe their own personal views, have made a decision where they say, I don't like what you do, and so you can't do it anymore, rather than making decisions based on fact and science.
Grizzly bears comes into, I think, the same kind of speech, well, the same people think of it the same as lions and so on. You see it in this country, hunters, when an article comes up about someone shooting a grizzly bear, criticizing them hunting bears from this country, saying, why would you do that?
Other hunters.
Other hunters doing it.
So like a misunderstanding of species.
Yeah.
Well, tell me, how could that strike? I mean, all right, where do you draw the line? It's okay to shoot a red stag. Why? Because we're going to eat it. Okay. So we're talking about bear meat, which I haven't eaten brown bear, but I've shot several black bears. I eat it. I actually like it. Where do you draw the line? Why is a red stag or roe deer's life worth less than a grizzly bear?
It's a very, very fair point, Phil. And in fact, I would even extend it beyond that. And we've said it on this show before, is all life. You should really value all life the same. And this is where we come into arguments, or we provide a basis for defense when you're having discussions with people who might not eat meat, whether that be vegans or vegetarians, and they're criticizing what you do as a hunter or a meat eater. And you say to them, well, just think what has died to put your food on the table. Now, that might not be a bird or a deer, but just think of insects. Okay, they're tiny, but the masses of insects that are killed globally to provide food, why should we care about those less than we care about a grizzly bear or an elephant? Think about bees as pollinators. I mean, that's an incredibly important story.
Insects, some could argue, are actually way more important than some of our larger land species.
For our survival.
Our survival. Wasps, bees, certain other species that...
Sea life.
Then you've got spiders and so on. The list goes on and on and on of how the importance of insects.
Yeah, so yeah, I agree with you, Phil. There is this distortion.
And
of
fish. Fish is a big one because
fish is a big one
because for some reason people just have a fish is not in the same category as a chicken or a cow or anything like that. But the bottom line is fish has a very hard time of it in our... If I'm not talking about farmed fish here, I'm talking about wild fish, has a really hard time right now.
Take something by the hook and drag it to shore by its face.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say that because I want to ban that next. But, the quick dispatching of an animal becomes, you heathen you. I don't know. Look, there's two definite facts. We as a species, the human beings, aren't going to become any less any point in time soon. We have to agree on that. I mean, we're not going to wipe ourselves out. What we are going to have to do, though, is to use what space we have left wisely. Now, I took a lot of flack for hunting an elephant in Zimbabwe. It was on the borders of Hwange National Park, where there's a definite overpopulation. But 3 tons of elephant meat went to that village. And this particular elephant was a problem. He destroyed a corn crop. But I'm not going to lie. I wanted to hunt an elephant. I wanted that experience. But I made damn sure that the entire elephant was utilized. Getting back to your point about farming and a vegan or vegetarian lifestyle, I don't begrudge anybody eating anything they want. Mm-hmm. If that makes you feel better or that diet works out for you, so be it. But do realize, I've grown up in fruit farms my entire life here in the Hudson Valley of New York. The state issues nuisance deer permits because they damage the trees to the farmers, and they'll go out and they'll kill a great amount of deer just to protect that fruit crop.
Yep. So
we're right back to it. Is your vegan vegetarian lifestyle helping wildlife?
Yeah, For me, it's an honesty thing. Be honest about our personal impacts. And that means really thinking through the process. And to be fair to a lot of people just probably haven't actually taken the time to think through the process, or maybe even had the availability of the information like what you've just told us there. I mean, I didn't know about that specific example, but I can think of citrus farms in South Africa where there's a very, very similar story. To have that information available to make those decisions, just realize that we have an impact and exactly what it is, and don't necessarily think, and this goes for hunters as well, don't necessarily think that we are so much better, whether it be a hunter or a vegan, than everybody else, and take a massively higher moral ground without understanding exactly where everybody fits into the puzzle.
Right. And the whole thing of it is, I think if the stores all closed and the belly button hit the backbone in about 3 days, the entire world's outlook on life and the processes that we go through would change.
Yeah.
We're a little too comfy. We're a little too fat. We forget where things actually come from. And, maybe that's modern civilization's fault or whatever the case may be. Again, I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm more of a live and let live kind of guy. But as hunters, I think we really need to examine ourselves in the mirror when nobody's looking and be okay with our conscience. You know what I mean?
I absolutely do, and you're very, very right there, Phil. If we
I'm getting too political. I want to tell you about Australia.
Yeah. I was just about to say to you, let's leave this heavy conversation behind. Story tell about Australia. I want to hear about your trip because we didn't actually really have a chance to talk about this when I saw you a few weeks ago.
Right. Australia is a long way from America.
It's a long way from anywhere.
Very long way. I had a couple of flight snafus. I was 24 hours behind everybody else. American Airlines, bless their heart, neglected to put my bag or rifle on the flight with me.
Hey, you're lucky you didn't get thrown off the flight.
It got even worse. But I have to give mad props to both Qantas Airlines and the Australian customs people, because they worked with me and were very, very nice and very, very pleasant to deal with. And long story short, I ended up in camp a couple of days behind everybody else. Australia is full of beautiful nothing. It's the best way I can describe it. Land mass-wise, it's bigger than the continental 48 United States, with less than 1/10 the population. So there's a lot of wide open spaces. I was lucky enough to hunt with a fellow named Graham Williams, who is a hell of a bloke if you want to go down for a buffalo. I think it's biggameaustralia.com, or just Google Graham Williams. He's got a concession in Arnhem Land, which is the Aboriginal lands, a little bit east of Darwin in the Northern Territory. He's got a concession of 2.5 million acres, or 1 million hectares.
That's crazy.
It's almost he told me it would take 12 hours to drive from one end to the other, the way the roads are. That's pretty cool. We saw wallabies. There were crocs in the water. Dingoes running around. But the Asiatic water buffalo, which was introduced to Australia in 1830 for both meat and leather, has gone feral, much like the camels, donkeys, and horses have. And they're actually considered a nuisance species, which I did not know until just prior to the hunt. So he's issued so many permits. He employs Aboriginal people from Weeman and I forget the name of the town. I think it's Weeman. His employees are Aboriginal. He's got a connection again to the community, but there are just more buffalo than you'll ever see anywhere else in your life. And for a big game hunter who likes to practice stalking, the instant comparison is drawn to Cape buffalo. Well, they're not as mean and they're not as nasty. And the answer to that is no, they're not. But they are bigger and they certainly are dangerous. So, as a matter of fact, 2 days before we got into camp, another professional hunter about 50 miles away, he had a buffalo charge him and he got smashed up pretty well. And I think he was 6 weeks in hospital.
Wow.
So, a big water buffalo will hurt you. But good Lord, guys, are they fun to hunt. They're probably 2,200 pounds on a great big bodied bull. You can really pick and choose your animal because there are so many to see. You can afford to be a little picky. They're not as switched on as a Cape buffalo is in Africa, and I would probably attribute that to a lack of predation. There are no lions to come after them, Yeah. So it's a different evolution, if you will. But Australia has got its own – it's kind of like Scotland compared to the rest of the world. It's got its own unique beauty. And, for somebody who's done Africa and they're looking for something different, I'd really recommend it. It's a rugged camp. Everybody always says there's everything in Australia is trying to kill you. You've got spiders and you've got snakes and you've got cane toads and, all this other crazy stuff. So you're kind of on alert that way. But, for a hunter who enjoys, hunting the bovine species – I think that needs to be on the list of things you've done or are going to do. It's a really unique experience. The meat goes to the Aborigines and, again, feeds the villages, without getting back on the conservation message, but it isn't just a, shoot at the kind of thing. They are huge and they can be nasty. But just to tell the story real quick, we had another Heim double rifle, this time in 470, a really big stick, and we had spotted the bull we wanted to take. He was actually feeding in the grass like 300, 400 yards away, and Graham says to me, "Do you see the one with the pink horns?" And I'm going, "Look, I didn't have gin and tonics last night, but am I really seeing pink horns?" Yeah, it's the mud they roll in. The soil conditions change every half mile or so around here, and there's varying shades of mud. We actually stalked to within 15 yards of that bull because, Graham used every little tree and termite mound and the wind perfectly. And I'm kind of wondering to myself, how close are we going to get? There's no bayonet stud on the end of this 470. I don't know if we're getting into a gunfight or what are we doing? And that'll also be on TV on a show called Trigicon's World of Sports Afield.
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot of fun to get within 15 yards of an animal weighing over a ton and then have it all begin. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's not a big enough stick in your hands.
Talk to me a little bit about big bores, big caliber guns. 'Cause a lot of people, especially in the UK, probably have never fired one. 375, the odd person might have a 375 that they've had a chance to shoot on a shooting range. I mean, when we were in Scotland, we had the great privilege of being able to shoot a number of big cartridge singles and, bolt actions and doubles there. It's a totally different ball game when you're talking about calibers of those proportions.
The door opened for me with moose, actually. My dad and I, we hunted moose together in Quebec a couple of times, and I have yet to take a moose. We saw a couple of real small bulls and passed, and the situation just wasn't right. But when I saw one, I said to myself, I was shooting a 308 Winchester at the time, and I'm probably not correct in this statement, but at the time I felt that way. I said, I need a bigger gun. These things are just enormous. And if a 308 is good for deer, I need something big. So what I wanted to buy was a 338 Winchester because that's kind of North America's do-all cartridge. Big bears, big elk, big moves. It works fine. The guy at the gun shop didn't have one, but he said, wait, if you don't mind a little bit more bullet weight and a, similar kind of cartridge, I have this 375 Holland. And I went, wow, is that an elephant gun? He goes, well, yeah, but it works for everything. And I just, I bought it. And that was somewhere around the year 2000. And I started having a lot of fun just shooting those big bore rifles. Number one, they were as accurate as a 30-06 or a 275 Rigby or whatever, 6.555. I can get a 375 to shoot well under a minute of angle. So that was amazing. And then I started bear hunting with it, and I'm like, wow, you really can tailor this gun to do this, that, and the other thing. Long story short, I took it to Africa, and it worked out perfect. And I'm a huge fan of the 375. But when I planned for a Cape Buffalo, the hook was kind of in my mouth, and I said, I want to try something bigger. And I went to a 416 Remington, and that, again, big gun, powerful kick, but you learn how to shoot it. It's a different, other than, I don't know if you guys shoot a lot of 300 Winchester, but 300 Winchester Magnum, 300 Weatherby, they can get a little sharp recoil. The big bores are more of a push. And I just kind of I became a fan of that big bore feel. The gun felt great in my hands. And to me, it also represents, the fact that we're going on a dangerous game hunt. I mean, yes, you can use them to hunt deer if you want to, but when you need a big gun, you're doing something dangerous, which is my favorite style of hunting. So when I became a gun writer, one of the first opportunities I jumped at was to review some of the different big bores, 458 lot, 450, 400, 416 Rigby, and now the 470. And, I play with 505 Gibbs, and I get a lot of toys that come in that we do for ammunition and rifle review. But there's almost an addictive quality to those as well. You think about it, it's like, oh my God, this thing's going to knock me over. And both Byron and Darryl, you were there. You saw that, Rachel Carey was shooting the 470. My wife was shooting the 350 Rigby. Women can shoot them. Smaller frame guys can shoot them. It's really not that terrible. But they're a wonderful experience in and of the fact that it truly will handle any game on earth. So, when you get up into that class of a Cape Buffalo in thick bush, or a huge-bodied water buffalo in Australia, or an elephant anywhere on the continent, which can just rip you to pieces, and if it falls on you, you'll probably be dead. You rely on that cartridge a little, and you look at it in a different light than you do your deer gun.
Yeah, you're right though. There's a very different emotion about it. when I have the chance to walk with a big caliber gun in Africa, normally 375, or I shot a 450 quite a few years ago. It just feels different. It's you walk across the land with a different gait. It's like you've been raised on another plane. You've been elevated in your predator level.
Pounds, right?
Sorry, say that again, Phil.
I said you're 6 inches taller and you drop 20 pounds.
Exactly. You
like
kind of walk.
Man.
You kind of walk with your chest out, and it's a strange thing. You have to experience it, and it's it's like nothing you experience with anything below sort of 375. That 375 is kind of the entry for that. I don't even get that feeling with like a 9.3. For those people who like guns and cartridges and stuff, they'll appreciate what I'm saying. Bolt action and double rifle, Phil, as a sort of, as we get towards the end of this, it is one of those great debates. If you're going to go dangerous game hunting, do you take a bolt action? Do you take a double rifle? A lot of the cartridges or similar cartridges are available in both, so that's not always the consideration as to what can I shoot through it. You've had a chance to use both quite extensively. What's your kind of view on it?
It's a loaded question, and it's one that's been going on for 100 years, and it'll probably be going on 100 years from now. Both have their flaws, both have their benefits. And I can put it probably simplest this way. Nothing has a faster second shot than a double rifle, but the bolt action has a faster third shot. Mm-hmm. I think that the double rifle limits the range. And what do I mean by that? Normally, they're not scoped. They're either iron-sighted, or I recently used one with a Trijicon RMR red dot, which does extend the range out to about 100 yards. Pretty, my eyes are getting older. A little bit easier than iron sights do. Whereas, with you, if you got a 416 Rigby with a 1-to-5 scope on it, you can shoot a buffalo at 200 yards. So that's the only shot you have. I think you'll get a wider variety of shot opportunities with a bolt-action rifle. But when the chips are down and the excrement has hit the oscillator, if you will, and you're following up a wounded animal, God forbid, in thick bush, or you're hunting in the Zambezi Valley for elephant, that immediate second shot in a handy iron-sighted rifle really shows the value of the double rifle. If I had to ultimately choose one, if they said, Massaro, you get one gun for the rest of your life to hunt all your dangerous game, it would probably be my Heim Express in 404. It's a ultimately reliable bolt gun, shoots fantastically with iron sights, can be scoped very easily, very universal. But given my druthers, I've ordered a 470 from Heim so that I can do that. I can let the tracker carry the 470. If for some reason I don't place that shot properly on the buffalo, or even if I do and he has the adrenaline to get in the thick bush, I can exchange guns for that short gun scenario in the 470, a very heavy bullet, low velocity, lots of striking power, not a long range gun, but it kind of puts an exclamation point on the end of the sentence when you need to. So, there's a certain, as we saw in Scotland when Mark brought out that beautiful old doll's head 470 Rigby, there's a certain mystique and romance to a double rifle that is irrefutable and will never go away. They're beautiful. I was just in London at the Holland & Holland shop, and I held one of their custom shop 600 nitros that I think worked out to, I don't know what it was, 320,000 pounds or some crazy amount of money. And I'm looking at the guy going, why did you just hand this to me? If I drop it, I have to run. They're very nostalgic. They're romantic as romantic gets. You think of your brawny-chested, young, strong professional hunter in Africa with a zebra hat band and a double gun. They're a useful tool. They're expensive to make and certainly not as cost-effective as a bolt gun. I think if you get the bug, you'll probably end up owning both before too long.
I know exactly. And the look on your face when you were handling some of those guns was just absolutely priceless, and I could tell that you were a man that massively appreciated what you were holding. And we're going to finish up just touching on Jim Corbett.
It was some of the rarest guns on the planet.
Yeah. We'll finish up just touching on Jim Corbett's rifle, because I don't think I've seen a look on a man's face apart from when he's been in love with somebody across the room. But that sort of feeling and emotion you get with an inanimate object is quite a difficult one to explain to people, and some people might think it's kind of disturbing if you have that kind of emotion attached to something which is a gun, a rifle. And I can only compare it to, well, there are plenty of people, including myself, who have this ridiculous passion and excitement about old Land Rovers. In fact, we had 2 Land Rovers, Land Rover Defenders, when we were up in Scotland.
3.
3, yes, yeah, we did. Yeah, 3 Defenders. And I can only compare it to that. It's the same thing. That's an inanimate, well, it does move, but not under its own steam, hopefully. And a lot of people feel something deep-seated about that, almost like you would feel about an animal or a person. And the same thing can be true of guns if you get bitten by that bug. And I know that you are certainly one of those people, Phil.
I got a couple of passions in life, and I'll draw this corollary. When you go to the Hard Rock Cafe, you are surrounded by a large number of collectible inanimate objects. People's guitars, people's coats, stage clothing. They're not the people. They're not the song, but that's what they represent. You know, just after I left you guys, I had a wonderful experience. We went to London, and the wife and I took a tour of the vault in the Hard Rock Cafe. And the curator, was showing me all the various, wonderful, wonderful vintage instruments. Dwayne Allman's guitar. And I don't know what kind of music you guys are into, but for me, that's my other passion. The gentleman sat me down on Jim's couch and handed me Jeff Beck's guitar to play a couple of notes on. And I came out of there shaking. And the only, comparison I could draw was when Mark unzipped the case on Jim Corbett's rifle. Now, if it wasn't Jim Corbett's rifle, you'd probably look at it and go, that thing's been, it's been around. The bore is shot. There's no bluing left. The stock is worn. It's dinged. It's not a high value gun. But when you, or at least for me, who has spent, the last 30 years reading the stories of adventure from India and Africa and the, Europe and the North American continent, you realize what that gun has done. When they put it in my hands, you could feel almost an energy exchange, kind of like I did with Jeff Beck's guitar. There's a feel to those things. And I'm not a big spiritual guy. I mean, I believe in God, don't get me wrong, but it's not like, there's a possession in this instrument. But you can tell there's an energy about that. And it was the same way with the Corbett gun. I leveled it at the wall, and though we were, 15, 16 people in that room at that point in time, I wasn't there. I was in Rudraprayag, Pradesh in India, and there was a man-eating tiger coming around the corner. It took me to that place. And, when we were at the range the next day, shooting a century-old 350 Rigby Magnum takedown or a Doll's Head, 470 or one of those 450 Nitros that are probably over 100 years old, I can only imagine the people throughout history who have held that, the things they've done with it, maybe the dreams they had, or, the hardships they faced. And to me, that's where it all comes together. I'm a very nostalgic guy when it comes to hunting. And, I can see you guys are too. We all embrace those Scottish traditions. We're come together as a decent people, as respectable, responsible hunters, because we want that connection with history. It's a means of embracing our forefathers, but bringing it into the present. And I think touching those guns and using them, and Mark Newton, if you're listening, thank you for that experience. I think it was very important for everybody there, because it's not just a mass produce. It's not a wrench. It is a tool, but it's so much more than that. Yeah. I mean, and I think you guys would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the most weird sensation, especially with a rifle like the Jim Corbett rifle, to think that his hands were on that exact rifle. And Mark told us that they reckon about 1 millimeter of wood had been worn off all over the stock
from holding it,
just from being carried around. which was incredible. Just to tie in to what you've just said, Phil, and to finish up this podcast, I literally just wrote this in an article last night, I think, which was one thing that it wasn't in an article. I penned it for an Instagram post today, which was that when you get, whether it be an old rifle or you look at some of the more modern rifle, it doesn't just have to be a Rigby. Obviously, we've been talking about Rigby because that was the trip that we were on. But any rifle where there's a bit of hand craftsmanship involved at a higher level, lovely piece of wood, something that you're not going to just swap out for another gun when you get bored of it, something that you're going to pass down. It does carry that history through the generations. And I think it's kind of sad that we live in a hunting world now, and a community where, and I think it's especially true in the States, maybe even more so than here, where our rifles and our guns have become a little bit of a disposable commodity. You buy a cheapish gun with a plastic stop, or even an expensive gun with a plastic stock, but are those rifles, those synthetic stocked stainless steel rifles, going to be there in 3 generations? I would suggest not, but a rifle like a Highland stock or like a highly finished CZ, which you can get from their custom shop, might very well be, and it carries a history through generations. And I think that's sad that we're losing that.
I think it's a double-edged sword there. And this is my own recommendation. I keep a journal, a handwritten journal of my hunting exploits, even the silly things I do in my backyard if I saw nothing. I want future generations to know that the gun they inherited, they can read about in great-grandpa's journals at some point in time. And I don't necessarily think that if it's a synthetic stainless gun, it is soulless. A lot of things, we do live in a disposable world, you're right, but I think it's what you do with them. And that's no slight to a good CZ or a good Rigby, because there's something hand-touched about that where it becomes a more desirable family heirloom, perhaps. But I'll leave it at this. My dad, as a young man, fresh out of the U.S. Army, couldn't afford to buy a really expensive rifle, so he bought a cheap Mossberg Model 100A in 308. Plastic trigger guard, pressed deer on the side, kind of cheesy from the late 60s. And while he owns some fantastic and beautiful rifles, I've told him, I said, Dad, when you're sitting down and you want to leave something to somebody, I don't want the house. I'm not looking for any of that. I said, what I would like, though, is your rifle, and not for the value of the rifle. It's what you did with it.
Yeah.
So I think you can make a soulless looking rifle into a very precious object. I think it's what we do with it and how we document things. That said, obviously the higher end, fancier stuff like the Rigby Highland Stalker has a prestige all unto itself, just looking at it. So, but that said, I think it's our actions that will live on more than the actual inanimate object. But what the inanimate object represents is those actions.
Yeah, no, I think that was a very fair point and counter to what I said there to finish up this podcast. You're absolutely right, Phil. It is what they have done and the stories they can tell. But the important thing is that they can tell the stories, and that it can only be done by people passing on those stories by word of mouth, or doing as you've done, which is very dedicated, which is to keep a journal of the things that you have done with the rifles that are in your cabinet. And that is fantastic. It's something I have done in the past and do have, but have been quite bad at keeping it 100% up to date in terms of records, and I really must pull my finger out and get back to that.
When you come back and they start handing you drams of whiskey, the sentences don't quite flow.
Phil, it's been a pleasure to have you on. We could literally talk for hours.
Byron Darrell, be well, be in touch, and hopefully we'll all be back on another podcast before too long.
I'm sure we will. Take it easy, Phil. Thank you.
Cheers.
And that's it for another 2 weeks. I hope you enjoyed that interview. And remember, thepacebrothers.com, Instagram, pace_brothers, We are on Twitter. I'm not sure what the handle is, but I'm pretty sure it's Pace Brothers.
We don't use it.
We don't really use it, but the thing is, we say we don't use it, but actually a lot of people do tweet us.
Yeah.
And I do check it, and I do sometimes reply. It's just too much. We can't keep up with all this social media. Obviously, we are on Facebook as well, which thank you very much for loads of people that have left us reviews on the Facebook page, and obviously reviews on the iTunes.
Yeah, I happened to be looking at them last night. Thank you. There's been a couple recently in the last couple of months. Thank you to those people. Thank you to everybody before. Please, if you've never done it or you haven't done it for a while, go and chuck us a review, because it really helps our rankings on iTunes. We actually have a lot more reviews on our podcast than a lot of other outdoors podcasts, so it really does help us reach more people. Make sure you go and...
I'm going to read one.
Oh, you're going to read a review?
Yeah, because people in the UK, you can't see the reviews that are left from the United States, and vice versa. You can only see the reviews that are left from your country, and we have a number of people from the United States that have left, and we've got one from the Cornish Humbre from USA. And it is consistent, balanced message that successfully articulates conservation from a managed resource perspective should be required listening for all. I like that, required listening for all.
That is very concise and brilliant.
Okay,
I'm
going to read another one because it's a very nice review. Not Just for British Hunters is the review title, and it is from the left-hand guy from USA.
He must be a left-hand shooter.
Yeah. If you love any aspect of being outdoors, hunting, shooting, fishing, kayaking, hiking, you'll get something from this podcast. If you care about traceability of your food, sustainability of the natural world, you will get something from this podcast. If you don't like these things and don't understand why people go into the wild, hunt, fish, or explore, you need to listen to this podcast. If you cannot understand why some of us take it upon ourselves to kill wild animals and yet can hand on heart say that we love those animals, you need to listen to this podcast. The brothers will talk to anyone with anything intelligent to say about hunting, conservation, exploration. This is not a standard 21st century echo chamber. Difficult subjects are not avoided, and the scope is global. Now that is
awesome.
Pretty cool.
I haven't even seen that.
You couldn't see it because I can see it.
Okay. Oh, that's just made my day.
There you go. And that's not trying to blow smoke up our own asses. This is we made this podcast over 2 years ago. We need to get a cake actually because hang on.
I think we've passed it. Have we
passed it. No, I think it's like the 28th or something of this month.
Of September.
Of September.
We need to look this up because we're going to get a 2-year cake.
Because our podcast is 2 years old, and that's pretty good going.
So this is number 61.
61, 2 years. And it's only due to the people listening. So
thank you so much to all of you listening. It means a great deal, and it means that we can keep on doing what we do, which, to be perfectly honest, is far more to do with the great people that we speak to than us.
Definitely. All we do is
we facilitate the questions.
We bring people to us or via the internet, and we ask them the questions that everyone else wants to know,
and then give those to you.
And the thing I love about it is, once these people that are very knowledgeable, they're often a hell of a lot more knowledgeable than we are about their subjects, because they're often experts in their fields, and we could never know as much as these people, all the huge amount of topics we talk about. But once it's out there, there's no excuse.
No, because
this podcast is available on nearly every platform you can think of. You can just search for it on Google; it comes up. And I think more of this is needed, not just from our podcast. I think if there's more information available that you can easily digest through audio or video, I think it's needed. It's good for everything.
It is good for everyone. And just the same as an increased amount of great storytelling through video, which is another thing that we do. The more people doing that, I think the better. The more people having these kind of conversations that we have on podcasts, the better. We were the first people to start.
I was going to say we were the first in the United Kingdom.
And the reason you preempted what I was going to say there, Dale, is that today, 2 years later, almost exactly 2 years after we started, there is now another 2 podcasts in the UK that talk about not exactly the same stuff, but similar.
Both started in the last 6 months.
Yeah. Well, the Countryside Alliance one was just 2 weeks ago.
Well, exactly. That's what I mean. So all very relatively new.
But that's great. The whole point is that it stimulates debate, and the more of this kind of good content that is out there, the better.
No, I agree.
It's all for the good.
And we've said this. I'm not sure if it was on the show we've talked to, but we've definitely talked to someone about it. The more people, I'm not just talking about podcasts, but I'm talking about other things in life. The more people that's doing something, like if there's 10 podcasts in the UK, let's say, all talking about hunting and shooting and fishing or whatever, and if they're all kind of working together in a way and kind of sharing each other's stuff, it's only good, because you'll grab people that might not know about your show, and then they learn new things about your show, and then your audience gets bigger and bigger, because more people might know about it, because they might be advertising somewhere else about their show, and the more people you're getting linked into this kind of world, it's better, I think.
It is very much a community, and we haven't done it in the UK because these are all very new, so we haven't had a chance to mention them. But we talk about some podcasts over the water in the States and Canada on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah. I even did a blog about my top 8 hunting podcasts for 2017. You can check it out online. And some of them are the top ones, the ones you would expect to be there. Joe Rogan, I mean, he's not just a hunting podcast, but no, he is a hunter, actually. Yeah. But I mean, he is probably the top 1% of podcasts on the planet for downloads.
It's crazy.
You're talking each episode, I think when it comes out in the first week, has 3 or 4 million downloads, which I think there's one other podcast that's similar to his, and that's a history podcast.
Yeah. He does like 3 or 4 a week.
Well, he's on show like 400-500 now.
No, I think more.
Is it more than that?
I think he's way more.
When I first started listening to him, it was 300-ish that he was on.
It's just crazy, and he has a studio.
Yeah. It's got about six camera angles.
It's no joke. His studio, if you've ever had a chance to look at it, and I say this with a word of caution, if you have sensitive ears and you don't like swearing, do not go and listen.
Young child, below probably 15 or 16, yeah.
Don't go and listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, because there's a lot of swearing and there's no holds barred on the topics of conversation.
In fact, I saw a meme the other day, and if people don't know what a meme is, it's just a picture with some writing on it.
Most of the youngsters should.
Most of the youngsters should. But, for example, our dad listens to the show. I don't know if... You know what? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he would know what a meme is.
Yeah. Maybe. Do you want to carry on explaining what it is, just in case?
Anyway, there was a picture, and it was a picture of a classroom saying, in the 90s or something, this is how we used to learn. And it was a picture of a teacher in the front of the class, with some English on the drawing board, and it says 2017, how we learn now, and it was just a picture of the Joe Rogan podcast.
It's true, though, because his variety of topics is just... I don't know how that man manages to get into his brain so much information on such a variety. If you're into mixed martial arts and UFC, he's got that down. If you're into hunting, he's got that down. Comedy,
I think a lot of he's a very smart man, but also it's his guests.
Yeah. Well, he'll learn a lot from his guests.
Exactly. Yeah.
He'll learn a lot from his guests. So we kind of got sidetracked there.
Sorry. There's lots of other great... I meant to end the show 5 minutes ago.
There's a lot of other great podcasts out there. Go listen to the Joe Rogan one if you don't know them and you're not too sensitive.
Yeah.
And that's it from us. You're going to be hearing from us in 2 weeks' time. I'm not quite sure who the guest is going to be yet. We haven't quite worked that out.
No.
But we promise to bring you something. Don't forget that this podcast is supported by the Scottish Association of Country Sport.